Hello there, lovely people, it's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and today we're going to finally review Kirby Star Allies for the Nintendo Switch. This review was originally written by the superb Mitch Vogel and has been adapted for video by me. But anyway, that's enough waffling, let's dive right into things. The core Kirby series has seen something of a revival in recent years, after a long period of interesting but different spin-off titles taking the main spotlight. Starting off with Kirby's return to Dreamland, this new era of mainline Kirby games has taken on a character of its own, almost standing out as a distinct sub-series. The latest release, Kirby Star Allies, stands as the most polished and enjoyable version of this new Kirby yet, but it also shows that the main Kirby formula is starting to get a little tired. Star Allies kicks off with a mysterious alien creature standing at an altar, performing a ritual which causes a rain of creepy-looking purple hearts to cascade across the universe. One heart, which just so happens to be appropriately pink, lands on a napping Kirby, imbuing him with the ability to cause his enemies to instantly become his friends, and finds himself caught up in yet another intergalactic adventure through the cutesy worlds that, as is tradition, culminates in a battle against an eldritch abomination that seems weirdly dark when contrasted with all the smiles and colours. As expected, this is a game that positively oozes charm in nearly all aspects, although it seems to be a little light on original ideas. This is the first mainline Kirby game to make the jump to HD, and the extra level of definition shows up in all the little details, whether you're playing portable or docked. Be it a falling star casting a soft glow on a nearby tree trunk, or a sunset in the distance causing the pillars of a castle to cast long shadows, the effects are top-notch and certainly qualify this to be in the running for the most visually impressive Kirby game to date. Even so, there's this notion that the developers wanted to play it safe here. You'll still find yourself running through some grassy field, fire, water type worlds that have appeared in Kirby games before, and while they certainly do look beautiful, it would have been nice to see an art direction that was a little more visually distinctive. This is matched by a similarly well done soundtrack that does little to surprise but plenty to satisfy. There's plenty of remixed themes that see a return from previous games to accompany new music, and the whole soundtrack does a great job of matching the setting and overall tone. Whether it be a threatening and mischievous track for a boss fight, or a whimsical track as you wander through a grassy plain, you'll be hard-pressed to find a bad tune in this diverse soundtrack. The same core gameplay of Kirby applies here, and there's a good mixture of new and old powers on offer. Series staples like Beam, Parasol, and Sword are present and accounted for, whilst interesting new ones like Spider and Artist help to bring new ideas into the mix. Each of the newer Kirby games also included a central gimmick, whether it be a mech suit or supercharged versions of powers, though Star Allies doesn't really have such a feature to make it stand out. Kirby's heart ability allows you to turn up to 3 enemies into AI companions who follow you around and fight alongside you, and of course they can also be human controlled. Building on top of this mechanic is power mixing, which allows Kirby, or allies with similar powers, to power up an ability with fire, electricity, and other elements. Brief linear sections where you band together with your teammates to do something like rolling in an unstoppable ball help to add some light variety in the gameplay, but the AI partners otherwise don't add much to the overall experience, aside from the option to have up to 3 friends jump in for local multiplayer. This is far from the first Kirby game to include such a mechanic, and whilst it's a nice feature to have, Kirby Star Allies doesn't do much to try new things with the idea. If anything, it makes an already easy game significantly easier, as a full team can easily mow down most of the bosses and enemies you encounter without breaking a sweat. In a similar vein, the power mixing mechanic is fun to play around with, but its limited options can make it feel somewhat tacked on. Essentially, any of the weapon-focused abilities can be buffed with elemental effects that augment their usefulness, whilst most of the other abilities have some sort of combined super attack that can hit multiple enemies. It can be fun to discover these extra abilities and attack, but the easy difficulty of the game hardly necessitates their use, which can make them feel like overkill in many instances. Often we found ourselves using the ability mixing not because it was particularly useful, but just because it made certain attacks look cooler. Whilst the main gimmicks of the game may come across as disappointing to some, the level design and overall pacing of Star Allies save it from being a total disappointment overall. The overall slow pace of the game doesn't prioritize rushing you from one set piece to the next, but instead focuses on just giving you the space to goof off and take your time drinking everything in. It can be great fun discovering the nuances of different powers and how certain team compositions work well together, and though the level designs will rarely challenge you, there's just enough pushback to keep you interested in playing just one more level. Though exploration and puzzle elements feel dramatically dialed back, each level does contain a series of puzzle pieces to collect, with one being a rainbow piece piece that's a little more difficult to obtain. At the end of every stage, these pieces are then randomly inserted into a handful of celebration paintings that call to mind the Puzzle Swap Street Pass puzzles, and these paintings all reference past Kirby games. Even the most dedicated players will take some time to fill out these paintings, and they do a good job of adding some much needed replay value to what is admittedly a rather short campaign. Though the campaign may well be on the short side, the post-game content is arguably where the real game begins. Guest Star Mode allows you to do a speedrun of the game whilst playing as any one of the common enemies you bump into along the way. Not only are you locked to that one power for a full run, but the difficulty is raised up just a little bit, and a variety of stat boosting hearts which boost health, speed and attack are scattered along your path. This sort of light RPG approach to the gameplay helps to keep repeat playthroughs from feeling too stale, whilst adding an incentive for exploration. Similarly, the ultimate choice is this game's version of the arena, and it tasks you with running a gauntlet of bosses with limited health refills in between. The difference here is that a difficulty slider at the beginning of an attempt dictates not only how many bosses you'll be facing, but also how many puzzle pieces you'll receive in turn for doing the thing. Bringing the difficulty slider all the way to the top is genuinely challenging, and there's plenty of replay value to be found if you wish to try passing it with all the abilities. And it wouldn't be a Kirby game without some side games as well, and Star Allies does not disappoint in this area. Chop Champ sees you competing with friends or AI opponents to mash the A button the fastest to chop down a tree whilst dodging obstacles. Star Slam Heroes see you timing button presses to fill up a gauge that determines how far you'll hit a meteor back into space with your appropriate bat. Whilst these aren't really much more than a momentary distraction from the main game, it's nice that they're included anyway. There's also one aspect that won't bother everybody but still bears mentioning, and that's the fact that Kirby Star Allies appears to perform at just 30 frames a second. Given that the last few entries in the series were at least close to 60 frames a second, and this doesn't appear to be a game that's too taxing on the Switch's hardware, this comes off as a bit of a disappointment. The game is still perfectly playable, and it felt a little less sluggish when playing on the TV, but the low frame rate certainly detracts from the overall experience and will no doubt prove to be a sticking point for some. All in all, Kirby Star Allies is a fun, relaxing game that does a good job of showing off what makes the main Kirby series so great. The slow-paced, diverse powers, beautiful environments, adorable enemy designs, and light difficulty ensure that this is an enjoyable ride from start to finish. With that being said, however, there's a lingering sense that the developers were a little too keen to play this one safe, and the lack of new ideas may come as a disappointment to series veterans. This is not the Super Mario Odyssey or The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild of the Kirby series, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad game. If you've never played a Kirby game before, this is a fantastic place to jump in, but if you're a long-time fan, you might not be blown away.